Welcome to the channel. This is my review slash opinion slash run through of a show that I'm liking very much. It's available on Amazon and it's a streaming show. I just enjoy the show because it's well written, um, well acted. Two main characters are really good. I enjoy their interaction together. Um, the writers are very good at doing dialogue between people. It's just normal, everyday stuff, but it works really well. I think I've said before in some of the other things where they get into a bit of it's not as good when they actually do the action, although this isn't really an action series, it's more of a relationship series. It is not even close to the Mr. and Mrs. Smith movie with Angela Jolie and Brad Pitt. But there's little bits of action in it, and they're not as good as and Brangelina, I guess, at the time when they shot that movie. Um, the two actors here, the main actors, could use a little bit more work on their action stuff, but it's still entertaining. It's not ridiculous or stupid or anything like that. It's still entertaining. Anyways, um, in this mission, the you start off the episode, the relationship between John and Jane is going downhill pretty fast. They're highly suspicious of each other. They're constantly quibbling, fighting, whatever. So you see when this episode starts that Jane is alone with Max, which is a cat, in her bed. You see a scene of John making his bed and then leaving. So they're not even sleeping in the same bedrooms anymore. Um, Jane gets up. She's obviously sick. She goes into her office and there's a big box of Kleenex there and some pills, and she's sniffing and snorting. And she pulls up the laptop and looks at it, and then it cuts to her being in the street. Again, it's kind of obvious that she's not feeling well, but she walks up to a house and hits the buzzer. And she's led into the building, don't know why, by another woman who brings her right into the house, don't know why, um, but offers her some tea and goes into the kitchen. And at that point, Jane pulls out a gun and starts screwing the silencer on, so you know what she's somewhat intending to do. The other woman comes back with two teas. Now, that's the fastest tea I've ever seen. Maybe she did it in the microwave or something, but no teapot for sure. Anyways, they sit down and Jane pulls out the gun and trains it on the other woman and tells her to sit down and makes her keep both cups in her of tea in her hand so she can control her. The one thing I notice is I know that actors have been told not to put their finger on the trigger um, of a gun. So yeah, you see if you've heard the Alec Baldwin case where he accidentally shot a director and killed a director, but it's kind of obvious that the Jane's person is um, not that familiar with firearms because she has her finger so far away from the trigger. It's ridiculous. She wouldn't be able to shoot anybody in time if they made a move on her. But anyways, that's just something that I brought up. Anyways, so then they start talking, and Jane's querying this other woman about what's going on, and if she slept with John, so obviously she's jealous in this relationship or whatever it is between John and this woman. She asks what John said about her. It's all good. If they've slept together, no. Do you know what John does? Yes. Do you really know what John does? Yes, he's told me. Do you know who I am? Yes. And so they're sort of a good scene of them interrogating each other until the point that the other woman says something that John has said nice about Jane, and she starts crying. So it's like becomes a therapy session, very short one, anyways. Um, and then the buzzer rings, and the other woman says it's John. I don't know how she knows that is, unless she was expecting him. But So Jane very casually says, "Well, if you tell him I'm here, I'm going to kill you." So she goes and hides, and sure enough, it's John, and he comes in and um, goes to the fridge and pulls out some popsicles, I think, and starts eating them. And he's watching a TV and sitting beside the woman. He's obviously quite comfortable with her, and he eats his popsicle, and they're talking about how he eats his popsicle, which again is sort of just the nice little bits and bobs that are in the dialogue, just sort of normal things. But John shuts off the TV. They're watching some weird movie. I'm not sure what it is, and says, "Where's my wife?" And Jane comes out, and there's kind of a moment, and at that point, Bev attacks Jane, and they get into a big fight. About it, Bev gets away and comes out with some kind of. It's like an automated garrote. If you don't know what garrote is, it was something that I guess Indian soldiers used to basically strangle somebody with a piece of rope. You've probably seen them in all kinds of spy thrillers or whatever. But this thing's got a little motor that it's gradually tightening the wire around John's neck. Ultimately, it might cut all the way through. But Jane and Bev is this other person are into a fight, and Bev finally gets free of Jane and runs out the door. Jane's gonna chase him, but John asks for help. So Jane basically comes over and helps him cut the wires off this thing. Uh, then they start fighting sort of immediately about what's going on, and John. This is supposed to be John's single mission, and she's there screwing it up because she doesn't think he can do it. And anyways, they say they got to go after her, and John says that he's put a tracker on the woman. And then they get into a fight of how he did it because he was giving her a massage and whether they had sex. And it's just very, just kind of the degeneration of the relationship and that they're fighting constantly, even though they're on a mission. So John's got a tracker, he's got his phone. They run out and they track her down to the subway. So this is where the action starts, where they're running through the subway train, dodging in and out, trying to capture Bev. Bev, at the very last second, managed to outsmart them and gets into the train and is gone. And John says, "No worries. We'll continue to track her until, except for his phone takes that moment to die." And then they get into an argument why he didn't charge his phone. But anyways, they go out and go into some little deli, and John buys a charger, and he asks the guy at the store if he can uh, charge his phone, and the guy won't let him because then they get into this weird argument between the store owner and John. And the store owner says, "Oh, that's how you get hacked," and John's like, "No, you just plug it into electricity." And anyways, while they're going back and forth on that, you can see here this is a scene just at sort of the end of the discussion. But Jane goes and starts getting things off the shelf, grabs a bag of chips, opens them, takes some chips, goes and gets some sushi from the guy behind the counter, and she opens that up and puts wasabi on it. And I think eats a roll of it. Asks for this loaf of bread. She gets the bread, takes it out of the bag, and right now she's just licking it. She does all this stuff, and then she says to the guy, finally, because John doesn't know what to do because he won't let her. He won't let the store owner won't let him charge his phone. So uh, Jane says, "Well, I guess you wanted us to pay for all this stuff," because she got a whole bunch of stuff and she opened it. So she gives him a credit card because she's seen on the counter there was a sign no credit, no debit, cash, or Venmo, I think only. So she goes, "Well, I don't have any cash." And John says, "Well, I've used my last bit." So then she very cleverly has cornered the store owner into allowing John to charge his phone because she says, "Well, you're going to have to let us charge his phone so he can pay you using Venmo." So they're standing there, and Jane's again still obviously sick, and John's kind of uh, offering her, getting her some water so she stays hydrated, and he shows us he still sort of cares about her, and it's just a funny little scene. Eventually, the phone charges enough that that John can pull up the tracking app and then passes it over to Jane's phone so in case his dies. And Jane then throws a wad of cash onto the counter to the store owner and they leave. So it's good. They go chasing over to where they think the woman is, that Bev, um, which John admits that he likes her, but just as if to hang out with kind of thing. And the whole time they're arguing about the mission, and John's like, "Well, this is the way I do it. I do it slower. I do this. I do that." And Jane's, "I just shoot her," kind of thing, because that Bev is actually their target, and I guess they're supposed to liquidate her. But anyways, they get to a restaurant, what happens to be where their first mission was in this restaurant. It's closed. They can't figure out where Bev is. Jane's saying, "John, what, you told her about this place?" And again, they're still arguing about it. And then John notices a postcard with gum stuck on the window of the restaurant. And he pulls it off, and there's his tracker on the back. So they've failed the mission. So then they go home, and they're still bitching and bickering about each other. John decides he's going to make her some soup. She says, "Oh, the neighbor brought me some soup." So John's in the kitchen and he sees the neighbor's soup and he throws it in the garbage. And he calls his mother and he's going through making some soup for Jane, who's retired to her bedroom with Max, the cat. And eventually John brings down a tray. It's got soup on it. It's got NyQuil, I think. And they're trying to figure out, they don't want to get a third fail, but they're figuring out they're going to have to tell the Hi, who's their, who's running them. So Jane has kind of said, "Well, you, you don't have to take all the blame. It was we both did it." And um, anyways, John just types out, "Target got away," hits return. They're both sitting there. Comes back. Mission failed. Wait for instructions. And John says, "That's it. He's done. He's leaving in the morning." And he leaves Jane there, and she picks her laptop off and throws it on the floor, breaking it because the keyboard comes off. And that's more or less the end of the episode, except for there's a little extra during the credits where you see Amazon van pulling up, and somebody comes with a box and shows up at the front door. Jane answers it, opens the box, and it's another laptop. So then you see her looking around, kind of, well, how the fuck did they know that the laptop broke? Which again, the end of this, the one thing about this episode is they're starting to have doubts about the person or persons that are running them, because John says, "Well, I went to Bev's place because Hi, which is what they call their handler, told me you were there." And they're like, "Well, why would he have done that? That makes no sense." And then Jane admits that she went to Bev's place because Hi, the handler, told her about John's single mission. So they're sort of confused, as doesn't necessarily make any sense why the handler would do that. They don't understand necessarily. And then Jane, this last scene where she gets the laptop and she's questioning how the hell they knew that the laptop got broken, and to send her a new one. So that's it. That's where the episode ends. Jane and John have split, or are splitting, and they're having doubts about each other and being a team, and they're starting to question their handler. So, good episode, some decent action, a lot of good dialogue, a lot of fighting between the characters. Really works well between the two actors. Some humor in it with the shop owner and things like that. So yeah, it's a decent episode. I enjoyed it. I enjoy the whole series. So there's Jane licking the bread and pulling her credit card out, and he won't accept a credit card. So she's like, "Oh, you're gonna have to let us charge the phone." Um, but yeah, it's a decent episode. There's only one more, and I'll give a short review of that one. But that's it for episode 7. Thank you.